Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if this is your first time. We're glad you're here. For quite some time, I have been concerned that my time of sculpture building is coming to an end simply because I am no longer bringing home more granite. I got out of the granite business, of course, in 2021. And I have quite a few videos here and there that show bits and pieces of the process, but I want to have one single video that at least touches on all the different aspects from beginning to end. Join me today as we take another look at the 2024 sculpture build, which resulted in 3 long videos and yet still left out much of the earlier parts of the process. Nevertheless, that video is definitely the most complete record of a sculpture build that I have so far. Today, I will condense those, along with other tidbits and statistics, to try and capture in a nutshell what it took to end up with what is now Granite Paradise. Here I am cutting out a couple of bathroom sinks, which we could say is the first step of each piece's long journey before becoming part of a sculpture in Granite Paradise. Here, my wife and I are making many runs with a pickup truck on a Saturday to bring home 4 months worth of granite that I had piled up at work. I think it was in 2020 or so. My wife is truly an unsung hero in this whole sculpture garden operation. As the video progresses, I want you to help me try and count the number of times each piece is moved. I've always said they move about 15 times. So far, once when I cut it out and set it on the table there, then I put it on a dolly where I would build a stack each day to roll out and unload here at the back pile. Then, as you see my wife doing, we would set the pieces on the back end of the truck to then hop up into the truck and move the pieces to the front end of the truck to make room for more pieces. So far, I've counted 6 times that the pieces have moved and we have not gotten home yet. Here, my friend Grant and I are unloading his pickup truck at the house. I think this was in 2010 or so, because that is when that little sculpture was in the front yard that I used to balance my phone on. Watch how the truck bed rises as we remove the weight. You can clearly see that it is a reverse of what we just did with my wife. We move each piece from inside the truck to the tailgate and then down onto the driveway storage area. This gives us at least 2 more moves to add to our list, for a total of 8 times so far. When the weather was nice, we could stack the pieces neatly right away, as we see here. But when there was snow and ice, often the piles on the driveway would become hideous and unorganized, and the pieces would all freeze together and sit there for months more before I could move them little by little into the backyard. That usually meant either carrying them 1 or 2 at a time or using a dolly, and getting them to the back patio, where again they would be piled. Once there, I would gradually move them yet again to any number of piles that I had scattered around based on general shape and size. Honestly, for about the first 5 years, I literally had only such piles, as the sculptures were not possible until I had enough of a given shape or size. Let's say that getting them into the backyard gives us a minimum of 2 more moves for a total of 10 times, and that is just to get it into the yard in a pile. Let's rejoin that 2024 sculpture build, which makes use of a couple of these semi-sorted piles that I had left to draw from. Without going into detail, for this sculpture we are using a base that was already there from a previously built sculpture that I decided to move. I call that cannibalism, which could be the subject for a whole new series of videos in the history of Granite Paradise. I put them on a large base, so there's this piece of stone, and then I believe there's one that's even bigger underneath it. And so I'm going to use this for a new sculpture. I'm going to use up this pile. I have a pile of smaller odds and ends left here, and that's pretty much all I have remaining. You know, because I don't work in the granite business anymore, so I'm not bringing any more granite. And what I want to do with those is create something similar to this. So maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that, I ended up with, again, what I call odds and ends. Pieces that I don't have very many of. And then I figure out a way to combine them into a nice looking, basically a glorified shelf. So the first thing I need to do is, and this is true with all the sculptures that you see here, obviously the first step is getting all the pieces here, which takes literally 10 years, no exaggeration. And then you sort them all by size and shape, and then you need to sort them by thickness, because they're all different thicknesses. I'm going to lay a few odds and ends pieces that I know I'm not going to use in the sculpture. I'll lay them on my wall there so I don't scratch up my wall. And then the process is basically just laying one piece on there and then grabbing another piece, butting it up against it. If they're the same, it goes in pile A. If they're not the same, it goes in the next pile, and so on.
Going back to counting the moves, this sorting likely adds about 3 moves, as it is quite rare to have it be the right thickness the first time. Some hit right away, and others I have to move all the way down the line 6 or 7 times to find the right fit. Let's call it 3 for a total of 13 so far. And I would venture that that is still a very conservative estimate.
So I'm going to bring that pile over and add it to this. That's the next step. I'm going to try to get that all done today. Amen, especially with coffee. Hey, just taking a break here, guys. Wanted to explain one little detail, and I've done this pretty much with all the sculptures. So these are what I call ugly pieces, or pieces that don't really match the others, but they're still good enough. I always assume the bottom 2 or 3 layers of any given sculpture are really not going to be visible because of gravel and grass maybe that grows up. So these, you might recognize, these are the pieces I tore up from the patio over there when I redid the patio last summer. You remember I explained the old patio. Well, these are most of the pieces, and I probably won't use all of them, but I brought them all over here just in case, because those are going to be the bottom probably 3 layers here. It just gives me a little more height and uses up material that I really don't have another use for. Build those bottom few layers.
Right away, notice how each piece is moved multiple times to get it to fit just right. This is especially true in a more complex design such as this one, but let's say that this adds another 2 moves per piece. I think that's a fair estimate, giving a new total of 15.
All right, here we are at day 3. As is typically the case in a more complex design, I have changed my mind. So I'm going to take this all apart, and I'm going to add in these much larger pieces for the bottom, and I think that'll give us a better looking base, and it'll also give us some more height. And I didn't realize I have so many of them, so they're no longer quite odds and ends. They actually, there's enough of them to match. So again, this is typical. I have many times gotten about 2 feet high, and then I change my mind and I get to take it all apart again.
Earlier in the video, I mentioned cannibalism, which is where I take down an existing sculpture because I need the pieces for a bigger and better design. Our estimate so far of how many times we move each piece does not include cannibalism, and nor does it include the many times when I change my mind. I think it is fair to say that between changing my mind like I am here and cannibalism, the better part of Granite Paradise has likely been built twice. but we won't count these moves since they are hard to calculate, but could be as much as another 10 moves or so, with disassembling, restacking, resorting, and then the whole rebuilding process again. I ended up with a lot more of these angular pieces, the pieces where I cut the corners like this, than I thought. So instead of being considered odds and ends, they actually fit quite well and make a very nice base for what might be a little larger sculpture than I was thinking. I managed to round up another couple pieces that can fit in here before I start the next section. And 3 of those pieces, if my memory serves me, are out in front of the house, buried in the ground. They were the base of one of my first sculptures I actually had in the front yard. And today, I'm going to dig those up because there's no reason to leave them in the ground. I don't ever plan on putting a sculpture out there again. So I'm going to dig them up and incorporate them into this one. This tiny base was to a very light sculpture, as you saw in the photo from 2010. You might remember that I used this little sculpture to hold my phone to record us unloading Grant's truck. So here are the 2 pieces that we just got out of the ground this morning. They're dried off now, and I kind of scraped most of the mud off them. Brought them back here. I also was able to find one more piece of the old style with the angle cuts. And what I'm going to try to do is put this piece under those 2. So I need to take those 2 off because this piece will fit nice on there. And then those 2 will go here. And they'll be offset by 1, but that doesn't matter because when we start the new section, it'll blend in just fine. I am really glad that I am counting the moves through the process of this video. I know that my original estimate of 15 moves per piece was far too few. All right, I had to do a little more fudging there than I thought. There's going to be rocks sitting in all these empty spaces here, so you really won't see too much, so I'm not being too fussy. But there it is. I think we're ready to start bringing over the rest of the material from the far corner. I'll do that right now. When the design is simple and all the pieces are the same size and shape, I am not likely to change my mind or have to reposition the pieces so much like we are seeing here. This design was extremely complex because of the wide variety of shapes and sizes. Basically all the materials that were not easily usable in the other earlier creations. Okay, that about does it for my material. I've got a few pieces back there yet that I can't get to, but I've got plenty here to start. It's all sorted by thickness. I'm thinking the best way, again, this is a new one for me because I have not done a sculpture made of this many different shapes before. And to have it look nice, it's really going to take some thought. But my plan is to spread each stack out in a row on the grass, separated then by size and shape. At least in the case of this sculpture, shall we add at least a few more moves per piece, bringing us to a total of 17 so far as an average. Since the piles were based on thickness alone, now I had to sort them by their different shapes. I'm going to build what I can with the 3 stacks that I laid out, and then I'll come back and resume. I am trying to show as many of the nice curves and other attractive features of the pieces as possible, along with synchronizing shapes and sizes in such a way that is also balanced and solid both in appearance and structure. This sculpture is also different in the sense that it is being built specifically to house one of my larger collections. Perhaps as much as 2,000 pounds of natural rocks will be able to be piled onto it when it is finished. Kind of got to the point where I ran out of granite. When you're using this many shapes,
It looks like there's still a lot left, but none of them match each other. Basically, our goal is to take all this material back off the wall, and instead of laying it in rows this way like I did, because I didn't have enough room because it ends over there, I'm going to lay them this way. So we'll have much more distance. This was a stage in the project that really had to be done all at once. With simpler sculptures, especially when I am not recording a video, I can work at a much slower pace. But since I am filming and there is this added step of spreading them on the grass to sort by size and shape within each thickness category, it was really a push to get it done, since leaving them on the grass would kill the grass. I'll show it to you from up here because I really couldn't get it all in again. If you look at the rows, you'll see that the same shape pieces go from left to right, and the thickness rows go from up and down. Even with all the sorting by thickness, remember that the thousands of slab varieties that we worked with came from literally every country in the world and were processed with many types of machinery. Especially the natural stones. Often the slabs would have very uneven backsides with humps and dips, or grading as much as a ½ an inch between one end of the slab to the other. I'm having to be really careful with balance, because if you can imagine straight, like if you were to drill a hole straight through the sculpture at every given point, which we're not going to do, but you want it to be supported. So I'm seeing here, there's an awful lot overhanging out on that far end. So I need to start bringing it back and have it overhanging this way. All imagining it centered on to me, it's an imaginary central point. And the goal is to have roughly equal weight on all sides. And it's kind of tricky. Like I said, I've never done this before with this many variety of pieces. Back to how many times I move each piece, I would say that in a complex design such as this, each piece moves between 20 to 25 times from me cutting it out at work to it finding its home in this sculpture. For the simpler sculptures involving one size and shape, the figure is still between 15 and 20. So if the sculpture weighs, for example, 15,000 pounds, that means that my back, and maybe someone else's back who may have helped me for a few of those moves, has moved around 300,000 pounds. That is about as much as a blue whale. So I guess I can say that I have moved about 30 blue whales, one piece at a time. But I'm going to have a lot of places for some really nice rocks to display. So I'm going to reposition the camera and keep going, because I still have not too much left. You are that person who loves or is curious about the mathematical aspects of the construction of these sculptures, or just architectural math in general, and even how much they might be worth, or what it might take to make one of your own, then I highly recommend that you watch the video linked at the end about the bell tower sculpture. In that video, I go into the size and number of pieces, the tooling and labor that was needed to get those pieces, what they might cost if you were to go and order them from a granite shop, the number of square footage of slab that it would take in total, and so forth. The bell tower is one of the larger sculptures here, but it is not the largest, and so it gives you some good ideas about what is involved. And so concludes the construction phase of what turned out to be actually much nicer and much taller than I thought it would be. I used up, as you can see, every single piece. I didn't think I'd get it done. I kept looking at the balance, and I think we're okay. I can push on it and climb on it, and it doesn't seem to move. So, but again, it's all based on an imaginary center point and trying to keep the weight equal all the way around. And the same thing as I load it with rocks, because that's going to hold a lot of rocks. Just on a technical note, for those of you more interested in the construction, I do notice, and I don't know if you can appreciate it in the video, really can't get it the right angle. Here we go. So again, I mentioned that imaginary center line, like if there was a pole drilled through in the exact center, what that would look like. And I believe, as I'm looking at the sculpture now, it overhangs more to the left than it does to the right. So what I do in those cases, and I haven't done it yet, is I have some small pieces of granite, and under one of these overhangs, wherever I think it'll have the most effect, I will build a little support, probably with little 5-inch circles. I'll insert them in there basically to form a column, like a little pillar, to just provide some extra support, because this overhangs quite a bit. It's really all overhanging in here, which is nice because it gives me a lot of room for some awfully big rocks. But I'm a little concerned that if, you know, for whatever reason the sculpture gets too loaded on this side, or somebody climbs up on it or something like that, I'd hate to have it fall over. So that is something I have yet to do, and just adding a lot more rocks. But basically this is done. I appreciate you watching this video series and the channel in general. Hope you've enjoyed it.